In under 12 months, a stablecoin most crypto users have never directly interacted with moved over $70 billion across blockchains. It's not a new competitor to USDT, it's Tether's own answers to a problem that quietly cost the industry hundreds of millions in bridge hacks, including the XRP bridge exploit we probably will cover in the future. This is USDT0, and here's exactly what it is and isn't. So what is the problem that actually USDT0 solved? Well, USDT exists natively on a specific set of blockchains Tether has chosen on directly deploying on. Ethereum, Tron, and a handful of others. But crypto today runs on dozens of active chains, many of which never got native Tether deployment. Historically, the way USDT showed up on these other chains was through third-party wrap or bridge versions, tokens claiming to represent USDT backed by whatever liquidity a specific bridge happens to be holding. That created exactly the problem we covered on this channel before. Liquidity fragmentation, where USDT on one chain isn't necessarily fungible with USDT on another, and moving between them means trusting a bridge security model, the same category of infrastructure that lost over $340 million across 14 separate exploits in 2026 alone, including that Corium bridge hack. USDT0 is Tether's own solution to that specific problem, launched on January 16, 2025 in partnership with Layer 0 Labs, first deploying on Inc., Kraken's Ethereum Layer 2 network. USDT0 gives Tether a way to extend USDT presence to chains it isn't natively deployed on without leaving that extension up to random third-party bridge operators. So how does it actually works? Well, real USDT gets locked in a vault contract on Ethereum. In exchange, an equivalent amount of USDT0 is minted on whichever destination chain you're sending it to, built on Layer 0's Omni-Chain Fungible Tokens or OFT standard. When you want to move USDT0 between two other chains that aren't Ethereum, the token gets burned on the source chains and minted fresh on the destination. So no new locking required since the underlying real USDT is already sitting in that original Ethereum vault. When you're ready to convert back to actual USDT, you burn your USDT0 and the corresponding real USDT gets unlocked from the vault. Now, worth being precise about the terminology here, since it can genuinely confuse people. USDT0 is not a separate stablecoin competing with USDT. It's better understood as a wrapped omni-chain representation of the exact same underlying dollar reserves, always backed one-to-one by real USDT locked on Ethereum. Essentially, you consolidate the locked USDT from bridges into a single contract. Security-wise, the current documentation states that every cross-chain message has to be independently verified by three separate validator networks, Layer 0's own, USDT0's, and Canary protocols, before it actually executes. That multi-party verification design is a direct deliberate contrast to a single point of failure setup like the kind that led to the Corium bridge gets drained when its relayer software trusted one flawed signal from itself. So how about the adoption and scale? Well, the numbers here are genuinely large for a product most retail users have never directly touched. As of Q1 2026, USDT0 is live across Hyper EVM, Berachain, Plasma, Blur, Inc., and Unichain, with more chains being added on an ongoing basis, specifically targeting networks where Tether hasn't built a native deployment on its own. Hyper EVM holds the largest USDT0 supply by a wide margin, which tracks with Hyperliquid's own outsized pool on stablecoin liquidity, something we've touched on in our MEV video given Hyperliquid's massive protocol V revenue. I will release that video probably in the future as well. The headline figure since launch, USDT0 has facilitated more than $70 billion in cross-chain value transfers in under 12 months. Real, substantial usage, not a speculative side project. That adoption is exactly why on February 10, 2026, Tether's investment announced a strategic investment directly into Layer 0 Labs, the company behind the messaging infrastructure USDT0 runs on. Financial terms weren't disclosed, but the signal is clear. Tether isn't just issuing a stablecoin anymore, it's now directly investing in the interoperability of infrastructure that stablecoin depends on, aligning its own incentives with the plumbing underneath its products, not just the product itself. Now, what are the risks? Because there is always a risk in DeFi, and certainly for this case as well. Well, this is the part we're slowing down for, because USDT0's design genuinely adds risk layer on top of a holding regular USDT, even though it's still fully backed one-to-one. Well, USDT0 is not operated by Tether directly. It's run by a separate company, Everdawn Labs, operating under license from Tether. That meant that holding USDT0 exposes you to a stake trust structure, Tether's own reserve risk, which already exists with regular USDT, plus the security of the Ethereum Lockbox Vault contract itself, plus Layer 0's validator networks correctly verifying every cross-chain message, plus Everdawn Labs correctly operating the OFT contracts support across every supported chain. That's 4 layers of trust instead of 1. Each one is a separate place. Something could technically go wrong, echoing the same more moving parts, more risk pattern we flagged with USDE and EtherFi on this channel. It's also worth a quick comparison to how Circle handles the same problem for USDC. Circle's cross-chain transfer protocol, or CCTP, actually burns native USDC on the source chain and mints native USDC on the destination chain instead. No lock reserve, no wrapped token layer sitting on top. USDT0 keeps a narrower minting surface for tethers by design, but it does so by keeping the wrapped token structure intact rather than eliminating it like Circles does for the USDC stablecoins, which is a real architectural trade-off between the two approaches. And finally, a very practical risk that has nothing to do with the protocol design at all. USDT0's own documentation is explicit that a one-to-one backing mechanism doesn't remove the very real risk of a user simply selecting the wrong network or sending funds to an unsupported destination. A mistake that on any cross-chain system can mean permanently losing your funds with no realistic recovery plan. Crypto seems to need to figure out a way to handle cross-chain transactions without that consequences. So, in conclusion, USDT0 isn't a new competitor to USDT, and it isn't trying to be. It's Tether's attempt to solve stablecoin liquidity fragmentation on its own terms, rather than leaving that job to a third-party bridges with a worse security track record. The adoption numbers, $70 billion moved in under a year, suggest it's genuinely working as intended, but fully backed one-to-one doesn't mean risk-free. USDT0 holders are trusting Tether's reserves, a licensed third-party operator, and Layer 0's verification layer all stacked on top of each other, which is exactly the kind of detail worth understanding before treating it as functionally identical to holding regular USDT. So if you find this useful, check out our breakdown or more videos like this. So stay safe guys, stay curious, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.